the version 3.0 is an evolution of the documentation of the OpenAPI 2.0. This structure is composed of several elements that each one with a specific function. For these studies, I have focused in the security and the paths components, understanding paths as several defined endpoints, and the security component. Here it's important to notice that for OpenAPI 2.0, the security component is called security definitions, and for 3.0 is security schemas. So why is essential to study security in APIs? So we use APIs all time in our phones and in our phone applications, in payments. So we have sensitive information to protect, and also APIs are often exposed to the internet. So we need to find some strategies to do that or study these strategies. So first, I'm going to show you some related work that is focusing in OpenAPI specification for security definitions. So the first one is about analyzing OpenAPI specification for security design issues. That is based in a case of a study from open bank projects that consists in 304 API calls and 402 data files. And also this related work that proposed a system to discover security schemas annotation in WEN APIs. This system scores security schemas and tested on 9 APIs. And also this related work that is to review one vulnerability called broken object level authorization. So in this case, for my studies, we have in our group a database defined with thousands of commits and more than 3,000 APIs, with APIs extract between 2015 to 2023. Here is an example on how is structured in Mongo Compass application, all these APIs. This is an example of one comment of one API with the structure based on OpenAPI specifications. So for this database, we have that APIs with the security schema defined following the OpenAPI specification is around 64.9%, and that corresponding to 66.2% of the commits. And and also we have APIs that doesn't follow the OpenAPI specification with the security schemas. That is 35.9%, corresponding to 33.8% of the commits. So OpenAPI specifications define security schemas as an authentication and authorization. Understanding authentication as a process to identifying a user, for example, credentials or usernames and passwords, and authorization, that is the process of access or denying a specific resource. So we are going to see several authentication and authorization protocols in the APIs applying in our database. For example, the API key, that is a form of authentication. Also OAuth2, that is an authorization protocol. Also, we can find OpenID Connect, that is an authentication protocol. The basic, that is an authentication schema built into the HTTP protocol. So we can also see how many APIs are applying these protocols. For example, we can see a tendency of the API, more of the APIs are using HTTP, AP key authentication, and OAuth2 authorization protocol. And here I am showing that the OpenAPI 3.0 is represented by the bar in red color, and also for the OpenAPI 2.0 is represented in the gray bar. So we can see more APIs in 3.0 version. Also, we can see distribution for commits. We also see here a tendency of the commits applying with API key authentication. So this is an example of how the structure of the OpenAPI 2.0 version of the one API from the database. So here we have that the developer use some names or convention names to protect different parts of the API. So this process is called using multiple keys. So the developer define a conventional name, and then they need to have an instructor to build that key. So they define a type where is going to have this key and a specific name of the key. So we also see that we can implement in several keys for protecting this part of the API. Also, I have an example for OpenAPI 3.0 that is using but an implicit flow where we can see an authorization URL where the user is directed to be authorized. And also we can see scopes in this implicit flow, and these scopes is about permission and access levels for the user. So can we see how an API is evolving in terms of security schemas? So here I have an overview of all the APIs corresponding to endpoints with security schema and the timestamp of the commit. So here I representing in each verbal the exact date when the commit has an endpoint with security schema. So I have the parameter called security schema type that is counting all the security schemas defined. In this case, O2 is defined 3 times, what we have here. And I also have a parameter called security level. In this case, because we have just one security schema defined, I just have a security level in 1. In this bar, I'm counting that all the possible security schemas combined. So here we can see a tendency of the APIs are applying between 1 or 3 security schemas combined. Also, it's possible to look for that APIs that use more than 2 or 3 OpenAPI security schemas based on OpenAPI definitions. And well, this is an overview from the old data set. So this is an example from the database, how is implementing the security for one API following the OpenAPI specification. This is a case for authorization. So this is the recommendation from the specification is to define at the level of the API with the components, and then define into the endpoint into the operation in the endpoint. So this is an example that I am studying to represent all the APIs. So how seriously do APIs developers take security in the API? So here I just want to see how the distribution of the endpoints the total endpoints with the endpoints that just have security schemas. So we can see an important outliers that is representing an important variability of these endpoints. So if we make a comparison of these total endpoints with endpoints that security schema, so we can see how is the APIs, and we can find APIs that has in all its endpoints security schema defined. For example, that is an API related with legal and juridical processing functions. And also we can see that APIs that doesn't have any security schema defined in their points. So as a next step for my studies, I want to classify these APIs to have a better view of this behavior. So what do developers usually emphasize when implementing a security schema? And what types and what combinations of security schemas are the most frequently used by developers? So for answer these questions, I consider in this case of study, the first one is the evolution of security schema documentation. And the second one, the most common API security features. And the last one, known OpenAPI security implementations. For the first one, I have this case that is an API called RNG API that is data from RNG experiments. And we have this example because this API starts with the structure from the OpenAPI 2.0 that is defined with scopes and also with flow. And then this API changed to use security schemas and define the same components, but with the different documentation, in this case for 3.0 version. So we can see like a restructuring of the elements of this part of the security into the API. So I just filter the APIs that have this behavior that start with 2.0 and just move to 3.0. I just find 200 APIs that have this behavior. And also it's important to filter because we can also review the APIs in terms of security schemas, as for example, these special APIs that is start with OpenAPI 2.0 with the security schema, and then move to the version 3. We can see some behavior that is that the endpoint is like deleted for this API. So for the second case of study, is about common API security schema features. I have these examples of several APIs that is using API key security authentication in the header, for example, and the developers are using this type of the structure. And also we can see several names for these keys that we can also see how is the behavior of these common APIs. So if we count in the APIs that, for example, is using the API key security schema in header, we can also see how many APIs are using it, and also API in query, and also API in cookie. So in this part, I want to introduce the API pattern. That is a pattern to provide solution for security requirements with authentication using access control mechanisms, and that recommends that as an API provide assigned each client a unique token. So it's possible using this pattern that an API key that the client can present to the API endpoint for identification purposes. So we can also see other cases than using also API keys, but the names refers to the same, but is changing a little bit, but is referred to the same security schema. It's the same structure, but is the several names. So we can also find these cases, and we can also count in the cases with the most common variation of the names, and also counting how many APIs are in the same structure but with different names for the key. So, for example, we can see that most of the OpenAPI in version 3.0 is defined here for most of the APIs, that is 267 APIs. So we can also study the other protocols like HTTP authentication with the structure. For example, we can find all the types of the HTTP applications in the database. So we can see a tendency in the database that APIs using HTTP with barrier for 103 APIs. And also we can count in the APIs that is using the O2 authorization and see what kind of flows are using with the developers using most frequently. So we can see a tendency also here that the O2 authorization for APIs from the database. So for this case of the study, for APIs that doesn't follow the OpenAPI specifications, so we have several cases, as for example this that doesn't have a component as Open specifications says, but they have security into the paths. So to continue with this study, maybe some techniques as natural processing language need to be used, for example, to extract some regular expressions. So I just wanted to continue with this case of the study also. And so I have also research questions to continue. For example, the first one, how do developers currently implement changes in the APIs? If they are doing with tools or manually. So the second one, have the changes been fully implemented and verified? For example, for the case of the structure is changing, but all the elements are applying. And the last one, can we consider a standard approach that aligns with the best practices? This question refers to all the conventional names that the developers are using to define, for example, an API key. So I want to show you the steps that I am doing to continue with these studies. And I just started with the dataset review, trying to read about the API patterns design from the Professor Pautasso. And I here in this step study the security component from the APIs, and then try to looking for patterns and maybe build a tool in the future to can detect a bad implementation in the security definitions. Thank you.